Hey guys, this is VaulSC. I hope that you are doing well. The Infinity Tabletop Simulator League is now into round 3, week 3, and we're on to the new mission, Recovery, with of course the new map. So congratulations to everybody who's completed 2 games so far and is having a good time. So, round 2 is passed. I know that you guys had a bit of a struggle. Well, not everybody had a bit of a struggle. Some people really enjoyed the field testing mission, but that's the last we'll see of that for a while. And the map, obviously, a little bit on the more dense side, but going into round 3, things will be a lot different. What I've now done is I've created a round 3 tab on the spreadsheet. So if you guys go to the public spreadsheet, which I'll relink in the video description, but you guys know where to find it. We now have the round 3 pairings, so all of the tournament guys are here on the left, all the way right down to here, and then if you scroll to the right, you'll see the casual division pairings right over here. Looks like I'm going to be playing against Tyrael from the USA. Talked to him, and I think our game's going to be at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Saturday, my time. So if you want to come and watch the stream, you're welcome to, but I'll probably put it up on YouTube after that. So things are going all right there, and then of course the Code 1 division over here does have a new set of pairings. I've copy-pasted the Code 1 pairings onto this round 3 sheet, as well as the Code 1 tab, so you can also find it over here. And as usual, there's a list of people who you can ask to watch your game and help out, or play against them if your opponent isn't able to make it for their game. Now I've got a number of things to cover off in this video. First thing I want to talk about is that it's gone pretty well with the matchups and game completions. I'm always very happy that the vast majority of people are completing their games on time, getting the results in with very few mistakes and errors, and anything that does go wrong tends to get fixed pretty quickly. So that's all looking really good. I've paired you basically according to the numbers, although there have been a couple of people switched here and there just to avoid any really close matchups, like people playing against each other in their meta when there's 2 or 3 other perfectly legitimate candidates either side of you who have very similar points. Like if you've got 17 objective points and your scheduled opponent also has 17, but they're from your area, and there's another person overseas that you could play who's also on 17, I've generally gravitated towards giving you that matchup, the foreign matchup. Now, after round 1, we had Crusader and Carolus at basically the top of the tables with a 10 objective point win. So they were supposed to play each other in round 1, but they didn't quite complete their game. That game is going to be completed fairly soon. But I still needed to give everybody else a matchup, otherwise we'd be waiting too far into the weekend, and I know a lot of people can only play during the weekend. So after some discussion, my resolution for that was to talk to a couple of people they could potentially play against in the middle of the rankings. So what I've done is I've assumed that after 3 tournament points and 10 objective points, let's say on average you might get a minor victory from the mission field testing, which is a pretty common result, and maybe pick up the half the objective points. Let's call that 5, although with that mission you tend to get a bit more. Either way, I've tried to look for somebody who's on 5 tournament points and 5 tournament points and 15 objective points, and I've asked that person to play whoever wins, and that person happened to be Bad Lazar from France, I think it is. Hungary, I meant to say. And I did talk to him, and I gave him the option of taking that match, and he did have the option of turning me down, but he decided to accept that. So Bad Lazar will be paired up against whoever wins the match between Crusader and Carolus. Then I also talked to somebody who was currently around about 3 tournament points and 10 objective points, and we ended up picking Dementor as our first go-to for that. He's actually got 3 tournament points and 16, but I was trying to look for somebody who would have a similar number of objective points after Carolus and Crusader finish their game, because even if you lose on field testing, it's likely that you'll get a handful of objective points. So for that reason, I approached Dementor, who has agreed and accepted to play the loser of this matchup. So once these guys finish their game, they will be given opponents. But the point of doing this is that everybody else can move ahead and schedule a game and doesn't have to wait, half the weekend for that to potentially happen. We had Al-Khalid and Havoc, who didn't complete their round 1 game at all. They did complete round 2 games against a couple of other opponents who have now been matched up. But Al-Khalid and Havoc go into round 3 still having not completed their round 1 game, so they still have the opportunity to do that. But for round 3, I've actually given them opponents right down the bottom here. So they will simply play 4D Flash and R-Type X, who are actually playing their round 2 game as I speak, like one hour before the deadline. So they're coming in really late, but all of these guys are pretty close to the bottom of the table, so I don't really mind swapping people around and having a situation where somebody who hasn't won any games is playing against one person who's won a single game. Look, that's just a side effect of you guys not completing games on time, but it won't really affect the rest of the league as it stands. So, well, not very much anyway, so I'm happy to let that one slide. We do have a few other people who just really haven't completed games, haven't really given me much of an ETA about specifically when that will happen. I know that Wakajuice has got one scheduled a little bit after the deadline. But again, if these guys actually finish their round 2 games, they'll be given other opponents amongst this little group of people who haven't really played yet. So it's only about half a dozen people at the bottom of the tables holding us up. Everybody else gets an opponent, and I think that's reasonably fair. Remember, you do have the rest of the league to make up points, and I will allow people to play a round 6 if they're near to the bottom of the tables and they missed out on playing a round to catch up if they really want to. So the goal is to try and give people enough opponents, and the primary aim of this league is to give you a chance to play people outside of your meta overseas and have a bit of a competitive, structured experience wherever possible. And for the vast majority of people, we are getting that. So pretty happy about how that has gone. With the casual division, we did have a similar situation with Nikki and Bidfell. So they were actually at the top of our casual table after one round. And they said to me that they can't complete their game until late Friday their time or Saturday, which is a bit late for me. So I wanted to give everybody else an opponent in the meantime. The way I handled that... excuse me. The way I handled that was I actually posted a message in the Discord, which you guys may have seen. I said, right, guys... option 1, we can just make everybody wait until the top table guys from round 1 complete their round 2 game. Then we give you a round 3 draw. Or we assume that those 2 players get a draw in terms of the matchmaking result and then retrospectively update their points later. So one guy will go to 2 wins, the other guy might go to a win and a loss, unless they actually do get a draw. Or third option is that we basically assume that somebody's going to go, a big victory a second time and hit the top of the tables, make that person play the current top of Tyrael, and then the other person can play somebody who's at the bottom of the group who have got a major victory, so somewhere around here, playing Shoki Shah. The majority of you guys who did respond to me said that second option's the preferred one, so I've gone with that, meaning that going into round 3, Nikki and Bidfell will complete their games as normal, but for round 3 they've already been drawn against Radek and Hazmaster, and what that allows us to do is give everybody else an opponent going into round 3 so that you can schedule your games, get stuck in, and nobody misses out on that golden weekend opportunity to get the casual league game done. So that means I'm playing Tyrael, as I said, tomorrow my time, 1 PM Saturday, hopefully streaming that. There were a couple of people at the bottom tables who just didn't really finish games on time, couldn't get things happening with their opponents, so I've basically just swapped their partners around and they can finish games when they want to. There's always going to be opportunities for casual guys to catch up or play people in other leagues and get points, so all you've really got to do to catch up in your games is talk to me and book opponents, and we'll sort something out for you. So it's really just a matter of your willingness and your availability to complete games. That's really all it is. So things going well there. In Code 1, things are fine, to be honest. I mean, there's a small group of 2 or 3 people at the bottom who just haven't really played any games that have been recorded yet. But again, if you want to catch up later, that's fine. And everybody else seems to be slotting in nicely with the pairings. I found it really easy to pair everybody else up because the numbers just dictated who played who, and there wasn't really any cases of me having to swap you because you'd already played your opponent in previous rounds. So that's just looking really awesome, and I'm hearing good things from the Code 1 guys, so that's very pleasing to hear. Alright, the next main point of news, which I really need to cover off, is this mission, recovery for round 3, because it's generated some conversation, and unfortunately I've had to put it through a couple of errata changes so far. Initially, the mission said that if you grab the opponent's beacon at any point in time, you just get 2 objective points, which you can never lose again. After thinking about that a bit and checking the wording of the rules, it is pretty clear that all you've really got to do is go base to base with the thing and you've got it. So what I decided to do is change the mission so that you can't get that bonus 2 objective points unless you grab it at some point in time after the first game round. So you can make a suicide run for it, but not in the initial sort of game round, right? And the reason I did that is because I didn't like the idea of somebody just dropping a Dale Army in, spending 1 short skill, picking it up, and letting the Dale Army die, and you got 2 points, and then just defending your deployment zone with jammers and mines and all of that stuff. So I didn't like that. You could also superior infiltrate an Onuwaban or something like that, or a Grunt or whatever it might be, and just grab it that way. And your opponent doesn't really have a chance to stop you. So my first change there was to make that impossible in the first game round, so that people would have enough time to do a census sweep and set up their mines and crazy koalas and just check for any approaches and actually give them a chance to interact with their opponent. Then I realized that's still not the best change, because in game rounds 2 and 3, people can still just dive onto it and grab it, and there are some units in the game which are quite good at doing that. Drop troopers and camo troopers and smoke grenades, and a lot of things can just make that Hail Mary dash in there, and so long as they get to it and pick it up, that just grabs the 2 objective points. And I don't really want make the mission all about suicide runs. So I've changed it one last time before we go into this round 3. The way I've changed it is that if you capture the beacon, it doesn't matter what point of the game you capture it, you still get the 2 objective points, but you have to at least hold on to it until the end of that turn. So for example, you're playing Hakislam, you're taking the first turn, you deploy your Dale Army next to it, Dale Army activates in turn 1, goes and grabs the beacon, your opponent sets off a mine and shoots a TR bot at it, and it dies. Well, because you didn't have it captured at the end of that turn, you don't get the points. However, if halfway through the game you make a dedicated run on the beacon, you're planning to take it back to your deployment zone, but you just don't quite make it far back enough, and your opponent comes in later and hunts you down and shoots you, well, you may well have got the 2 objective points, because if you went and grabbed it, moved it back a bit, or even just stood there and held out until the end of the turn without dying, then you will get the 2 objective points. So it makes it a little bit harder to do, and I think that the mission is a lot fairer and a lot more balanced now. So I've made a bit of an overview here in the patch notes, but let's just go through this together and actually read how I've worded it. If anybody misunderstands this, just talk to your opponent about how you want to play it. It's a bit late for me to make more erratas now, but let's go through it. Initially it says, main objective, have captured the enemy beacon at the end of any player turn, 2 objective points. That does not mean that you get a plus 2 objective points for every single turn that you have captured it at the end of, because there's a caveat here in italics with the asterisks. Points scored for capturing the enemy beacon at the end of any player turn is cumulative, meaning it stacks with points scored for having the beacon captured at the end of the game, but these 2 objective points can only be gained once per game for this bullet point. So what I'm trying to spell out clearly there is that you can get this bonus 2 objective points once and once only, and to do that you have to have captured it and be in the state of having captured it at the end of a particular turn, right? So imagine you're taking first turn and you charge somebody over there, you weather all of their attacks, maybe you stand aside a smoke cloud, whatever it is, you pick it up and then you don't spend any more orders in that model, it survives, you get 2 objective points at the end of that turn, but only if you did survive. If you get shot and you go dogged because you have that ability, the model will die and then the check for the end of the turn will occur after that. I believe that is precedented with the way that this kind of mission works. Like in Capture and Protect, if you grab the beacon at the end of the game while dogged, I don't believe you would actually hold on to it. Similarly for this mission, that's not going to work. But you may think of some really smart strategies of disabling your opponent's traps. You might have an Eclipse Grenade there. You might be able to drop something in and grab it and stand there. You get 2 objective points. That's it. Remember, there's another 4 objective points up for grab which don't even involve the beacon. So if your opponent has really done that, but you've killed their designated target with your data tracker and you've captured both antennas, you'll still win 4-2. So this mission really is about the objectives for the beacons if you want a big 10-0 swing, but a lot of games will come down to neither player getting anywhere near their opponent's beacons, and you'll be going after that designated target and the antennas. That's how a lot of my practice games have gone. And I think that you guys will have some similar experiences. But again, people trying to come top 10 in this tournament will really be pushing heavily to grab that beacon. This mission is a little bit easier to get a big win on if you take the second turn. Having said that, you know, if your opponent's going first, getting a bit of momentum, killing designated target, shifting theirs away, there's a pretty big, strong argument for going first as well. But it's going to depend on you and your strategy and your approach to the game and your matchup and your list. So I think this mission's in a pretty good state at the moment. One other conversation that came up recently is that with common rules of beacons and how to pick it up, there is a clause here about picking it up where it says you can grab the beacon if the trooper is in base contact with an enemy beacon and there are no enemy troops also in contact with that trooper. It's a little bit more ambiguous in the Corvus Belli version where they say the word it as an IT at the end instead of trooper, meaning, you know, it could possibly be referring to the beacon rather than the trooper. My thoughts are that if your opponent has the beacon sitting out in the open and they have their troopers touching it, and you move your model up to the beacon and grab it and pick it up, you can do that because the enemy troopers aren't in base contact with you, they're just in base contact with the beacon, which doesn't prevent it from being picked up. And that's quite an important caveat for me. If we draw your attention down to pages 13 and 14, I have added in some extra text in the clarification section for recovery where I'm talking about it a bit more. So let's just read what I've said here. Capturing a beacon in this mission grants an initial 2 objective points which can't be lost later in the game, like before, but you have to hold on to it until the end of the turn you picked it up. If you go into dogged state while capturing the beacon, your model dies at the end of the turn, and then a check's made to see if it still has the beacon. So, you know, it doesn't in this case because it dies and you don't have the beacon. But you could still have another friendly model pick it up from the dogged trooper as normal. Meaning that if you send your Quangxi over, you grab the beacon, you're running away, you get shot, you're still dogged, so one of your own friendly troopers moves over to the Quangxi, passes the ball to that friendly trooper and runs away with it. As long as the trooper holding it at the end of the turn's got it, then you get the bonus points. Holding onto a beacon when the game ends will yield further objective points that are added to the initial 2 that the player gained earlier. That makes sense. That's a separate check from the end of turn thing. Now, here's something else. A note about the start location of the beacons. I've put silhouette 3 objectives in the positions where the beacons are initially placed. Let's just quickly look at the map. So you can see the beacons are supposed to be here, and I've put this big fat objective silhouette 3 thing here. So continuing that thought, players are welcome to delete these and put a silhouette 0 marker on the ground to represent the beacons instead. That's optional. You can modify my map to do that if your opponent agrees. That's perfectly fine. However, I like to have the beacon start contained inside an S3 objective and have the pick up ability remove the beacon from the S3 as if it was a containing box, similar to the supplies mission, but without a willpower check. If the enemy moves troops into base contact with that S3 container, it doesn't prevent you from picking up the beacon. Talk to your opponent about how you would like to play the start location of the beacons. So, let me just demonstrate further what I mean by that. So, we've got Combined Army over here, and here's a defending player who's got JSA. Okay? So, the way I've got it at the moment is that we've got this Daiokai sitting over here, and here's where the beacon actually is. Let's say I spend an order on my Umbra, and I pick him up, and I walk over to where the beacon is. That is the box. Somehow he survives the Daiokai, but he spends a second short skill declaring the pickup action, as described in the recovery mission, which we can find way back here. So that's the pickup beacon short skill, which we're reading right here. After that's picked up, we then bring the beacon marker over on top of the Umbra, and he's now holding the beacon. Maybe he gets shot by the Daiokai, which means that this Nox can walk over and pick up the beacon and then start walking away with it with new short skills, and this beacon will basically just be sitting on the Nox for the rest of the game. So that's how I like to play it, and this is basically a scenery piece which you can't deploy next to, but you can move up to and gain cover from. That's how I like to play this mission. You guys don't have to do it that way. If you want to, you can agree with your opponent. You're going to right-click this thing, delete it, and delete this thing as well. Get out the grid, put the grid in here, and then basically have the beacon start exactly there like it implies it should in the mission, and as you probably would with Capture and Protect. So you've got the antennas out here and over here, and then the beacon's just sitting there, so it doesn't provide any cover. And to get it, you simply, you're walking over to it, you're touching it, you're picking it up, and then you're running away with it. So if you want to play the mission that way, be my guest, that's perfectly fine. I just like the feel of having that Silhouette 3 there because it works a bit more like the supplies mission. It gives your opponent that little obstacle to try and hide behind, and it means that the box is kind of separate from the beacon, and being near to this thing doesn't put their models in base contact with it, so it removes any ambiguity about what's going on with picking it up. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's relatively clear for you guys. You may have seen this map. I'll post a link to it in the video description if you haven't already subscribed to it, but this is another classic VaulSC map where there are some massively long fire lanes. If you check this out over here, the person controlling this side has got a massive line through there, absolutely huge. They're also covering off this little approach over here to the antenna. I've deliberately put a billboard here so that if you're specifically standing there, you've got this amazing line through here and through here, but you don't have this one as well. However, if you deploy on this side of it, yep, you can get the center that's covered off and this one here and through here, but you're kind of missing out on this long one here, so there's a bit of a compromise. That's perfectly fine. I've also made the approach to the actual objectives really open, as you should. It's difficult to get the objectives, the beacons. That's supposed to be a real commitment. But some players will really just steamroll their opponent after 3 turns of just shooting things and bombarding your opponent with attacks. It'll be relatively easy to move through and pick up the beacon near to the end of the game. And we will see some major victories on this map, I assure you guys. But again, there'll be some cagey games where you defend your beacon and then you come in and grab these antennas at the end. There should be a reasonable number of places to hide your designated target, but again, there are going to be approaches to attack it. I've deliberately made this side of the table a bit more congested, so if you are relying on the shorter range stuff, you can approach from this angle with your multi-rifles and Spitfires. This side of the table, though, there are some really brutally long fire lanes, as you can see. Really golden for your TO snipers and missile launchers and link teams, and I want that to be the case. We're going to have some maps which are a bit more closed off. This one has a mixture of the congested chain rifle smoke grenade areas. This side has the long range stuff, but again, they are thin fire lanes. Smoke warbands are going to be golden as they always are. Jammers are still going to be powerful. The Mad Traps and Crazy Koalas are still going to be powerful. So I think you guys will still have a good time on this map. I've already played one practice game on it. It was fine. And your feedback's always welcome. The next 2 maps are going to be completely different in different ways, but we'll also have a mixture of long fire lanes and closed stuff. So I hope that you guys are okay with all of that. This weekend I'm hopefully going to put up a little tutorial helping people with the 3D miniatures project. We have encountered the occasional bug here and there with it, but it's gone quite well. One thing I have noticed is that if you are in a different game and you click on games and you go to the miniatures project and you hit the expand button and try to drag assets out of the workshop without actually being in it, it sometimes causes things to bug out and not appear. But I assure you, if you take the time to load up TTS and pick the models out that you want, put them in a bag, save that, they will work. If you do encounter any problems, just save your game, quit out of TTS completely, come back in, and that will solve the vast majority of problems. We do have some Hakaslam in here, finally from Perzan, so just about every faction is covered with at least some stuff. More things are going in every day. We're getting more organized about it. The miniatures are still really, really cool. And I do strongly encourage you guys to make as much use of as you can with the 3D miniature stuff, because the project, as far as that's going, is really, really good. Cool, well I hope you guys are having a good time with the league. I certainly am. I'm up 2 games. Again, playing Tyrael tomorrow, so looking forward to that match. Continue to DM me with your questions and your comments, and post in group chat for the general kind of discussions which need people's input. And best of luck for the next round, guys. Hope you enjoy recovery, and before we know it, I'll be seeing you again for round 4.